Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Washington, D.C. I am Nick Miller alongside Reid. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
And I saw you earlier this morning and I said, what are you playing today? And you said homebrew.
Yeah.
And my eyes lit up because
that's really the only way to describe this deck.
in this standard format to hear homebrew, I was like, deck tech is already lined up. Put you on camera. You got this green-blue devotion deck we're calling the Wanderer Bard because you have 4 of Yisun, the Wanderer Bard from N15.
Yeah.
Talk about how you got to this deck.
Well, yeah, Yisun's definitely the linchpin of the deck. I had played around with Prophet of Krufix decks in the past, and they were always not quite competitive enough, but always a lot of fun. So when Yisun was spoiled, I wrote an article, did a lot of brewing, tested some ideas, combining Yisun with Prophet of Krufix and Kiora's Follower as well, to be able to use them multiple times in the same turn cycle. And yeah, tuning, finally narrowed it down to just 2 colors and a deck that has 4 copies each of Yisun, Prophet of Krufix, and Kiora's Follower, and then a lot of 1-of creatures.
Right, and these 1-ofs go across the board. You've got Reclamation Sage, Nylea, Arbor Colossus, Nylea's Disciple, Scavenge Goose, Burning Tree Emissary, and then you have a couple of other cards, Pelucranos, Courser of Krufix, a couple copies of Prime Speaker Zagon, I know a card you've been in favor of, back from Prime Speaker Bant.
Right.
And this deck just has so many on-table interactions. My favorite, of course, when you activated Yisun to get Burning Tree Emissary, untap it with the follower to get another one. With Prophet in play, the next turn you activated it 2 more times.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool tricks you can do. It's a wild deck to play because at any given point you're playing not only with the cards in your hand, but like almost everything in your library between Yisun, Court of Calling, all these different options, all these different 1-ofs. It's a lot to keep track of. Yeah,
the recall of all the cards in your deck to figure out all of the lines of play. Hard on you, even harder on your opponent.
Right,
Green-white opponent, round 1, you had Prophet in play with Yisun. It's like, well, what is he going to bring up next? He had like 5 creatures in play, which is usually a lot. You know.
People who have been watching my matches come up to me and they ask me like, oh, do you have this card? Do you have this card? Do you have this card? And it's I think a big advantage for me that I have this like mysterious deck. They don't know what I can search up, what I have access to, what I don't have access to. So, equally challenging to play against as it is challenging to play.
Right, last round you were playing against the green-red devotion deck. He had, put out Hornet Queen after a nice attack, which looked pretty bad, and then you activated Yisun a couple of times, got Nylea, found your Nykthos, and then just infinite mana shove. Not even enough with all that Death Touch. Prime Speaker, I think you activated for 12?
Yeah, I drew 12 cards in the last game. It's really the perfect card for this deck because between the Prophet and Nykthos with Kiora's Follower, it's not out of the question that you can just have 100 mana every turn. So when you get to draw 12 cards, you play them out really quickly and the opponent just kind of gets buried.
Right, not only did you get to draw a ton of cards, which, Prime Speaker has done, you got to play all the cards, which normally you get to draw it and you have to make a decision. Which card am I going to play? You just played 4 or 5 creatures from your hand, untapped, and how do you like that? So you've also got some Court of Callings, 2 copies of that to help facilitate the engine, I assume?
Yeah, Court of Calling's a little bit expensive, and this isn't like a huge mana deck normally. I have definitely a few mana elves, but I don't really get to like 10 and 12 mana as fast as the other green devotion deck, so I wanted to keep it a little bit light on the cord. But that said, I have a lot of 1-of creatures, and it goes well with the deck. So
right, the Sage, a great target to blow some things up.
Yeah.
The Disciple to help you out when you're getting beat down. I saw you on camera do that for like 12 life while you responded to the trigger to get more creatures in play. So very powerful. And with Yisun, it's basically your cord, but for only 3 mana that you get to use multiple times.
Right.
So, because I had the card in my pre-release and it was cool to do it, but normally getting the 1s and 2s aren't that great. But when you get to untap it and you just get to ratchet her up 3, 4, 5, then you're finding everything.
Right.
Now you've got 2 other instants in your deck, Plasm Capture and Negate. Talk about these guys.
Yeah, the deck has to be mostly creatures because of Yisun and wanting to have access to a variety, but I do have a couple spells that are really important. Negate and Plasm Capture are there basically to have just something interactive. Sometimes you draw a lot of cards with Prime Speaker Zagana. but it's just very important to have an answer to Mizium Mortars when they hit their 6th land. Negate, I think, is just a really, really good card right now because of the Jund Planeswalker deck that's very popular.
Yeah.
You counter, 30 cards out of their deck with Negate, so that's a card that I think it's really helpful for any blue deck to have access to right now.
And that's a deck that has taken off in popularity as well.
Absolutely.
So having main deck answers to a lot of those Planeswalkers is very good. So the rest of the deck's Mana Elves and Untappers and things like that. Let's move to the sideboard.
Sure.
After you've already done some pretty sweet things with the main deck. Sideboard, you got some Setessan tactics.
Yeah, I have a variety of creatures, like extra copies of my important Silver Bullet guys, just to kind of shore things up depending on the matchup. I have the normal mono blue hate that you'd expect from any green deck.
Skylasher and Mistcutters.
And then, a lot of the sideboard is devoted to shoring up the control matchup because Supreme Verdict is so good against me. I have some counter spells in my sideboard and some Planeswalkers just to diversify the angles I can attack from that matchup.
Right. The Jace Memory Adept can actually clock them pretty quickly as well as, sometimes hit their elixir.
Yep. You have Reclamation Sage if they try to answer it with Detention Sphere, so it can be a pretty resilient threat. It's hard for them to beat.
Very powerful deck. Now, you talked about your testing this for the Pro Tour, but you decided the meta for that probably not too favorable with a bunch of black decks and control.
Yeah, this deck actually performed pretty well in my Pro Tour testing. It was good against, the field, so to speak, any random deck you might throw against it. But like I said, it's a big underdog against the Supreme Verdict decks and a small or medium underdog against the black decks with a lot of removal. So at the Pro Tour, when I thought those were going to be the two most popular decks, it wasn't my first choice. But now that the field has opened up a little bit, I think this is a pretty competitive deck.
Right. For a deck at an open where, you might not play a control deck or you might only play it once,
Yeah.
Pretty good against the field, especially if you keep getting pairings like you are now with these green decks and you're just doing way bigger and better things.
Also, this deck's just a ton of fun. I mean, Standard's been around for a year without changing all that much. Everybody's bored of the decks, but having the chance to play something different, I really value.
Well, to have you come to this tournament with a sweet deck for a deck tech, I was super happy. Thanks for sitting down with me here in the sideboard. I will see you in New Jersey next week for the Invitational.
I'll be there.
Alrighty. Well, stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for all the action here in DC.